Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're here to unpack complex stories and really pull out those insights you might not expect.
Glad to be here.
So today we're diving into something pretty tricky. What happens when the systems, the ones supposed to protect you, just don't?
Yeah, especially those voluntary ones, the kind built more on, let's say, good faith than actual legal teeth.
Exactly. What happens when that trust breaks down? Our focus today is really centered on a personal story from Mohammed Khan. He's a former franchisee. And we'll also look at the Canadian Franchise Association, the CFA.
Right.
Our mission here is to figure out, okay, what can we learn from his experience? When does relying on voluntary systems become a problem? And what does that mean for you, the listener, when you think about like consumer protection or needing legal help?
It's about understanding what happens when you expect a fair process, but, well, you hit silence instead.
Absolutely. And just a crucial heads up before we really get into it. This deep dive is based on Mohammed Khan's personal account. It's his experience we're discussing. No court or regulatory body has actually made any findings against Gino's Pizza Inc. or the CFA. The views we're sharing, they're really for public awareness. We're not alleging any unlawful conduct here.
It's about exploring the system through his lens, learning from what he went through.
Got it. So let's paint the picture. Mohammed Khan, he starts off with a lot of faith in Gino's Pizza. He also really trusted the Canadian Franchise Association. He genuinely thought, okay, if issues come up, these guys will ensure things are fair, that there's a resolution.
That makes sense. You see an association name, you often assume a certain level of oversight or mediation power.
He even told us quite clearly, I believed in Gino's, I believed in the Canadian Franchise Association, I believed that fairness mattered. Simple as that. But then he sold his franchise, expected things to wrap up smoothly. And instead, silence. An unexpected, deafening silence.
And it's useful here to understand what the Canadian Franchise Association actually is. It's a national trade body, nonprofit, and it represents, I think, over 600 franchise brands across Canada.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, quite large. They have a code of ethics, which sounds good, and even an ombudsman service. But here's the critical part. It's a trade body. It's funded by its members.
Right.
Its main job is advocacy for those members, not necessarily enforcing consumer law like a government regulator would. It can't force anyone to follow laws or make decisions that are legally binding.
It's not court.
Not at all. It's an association aiming for industry standards, yes, but not a legal arbiter.
That difference is huge. And it seems like that's really the crux of Mohammed's whole experience.
Yeah.
Interestingly, he actually knew that franchisees in Ontario have legal protection under something called the Arthur Wishart Act.
Yes, that act is significant. It mandates things like proper disclosure before you sign a franchise agreement, the right to associate with other franchisees, things like that. Real legal rights.
So he knew about this legal route. But initially, he chose to go through the CFA. He thought, it would be maybe simpler, more straightforward to get an informal resolution that way.
Which is a common hope, isn't it? People often prefer to avoid the courts if they can. They hope a professional body can help find a fair, amicable solution without all the cost and complexity of legal action.
Definitely. That was the hope. But that hope kind of fell apart pretty quickly. So Mohammed sold his franchise back on June 6, 2024. He got an initial payment, $50,000 up front.
Okay.
The rest was due on July 24th. But late July rolls around, nothing. No further payments came through.
Just silence again?
Yeah. And he tried contacting Gino's. Even the CFA's ombudsman tried reaching out.
Yeah.
Calls, emails, just crickets. No response. Then, come September, October, he's sending follow-up emails to both the CFA and Gino's head office again. And that's when he finds out his former store. It had actually been resold to someone else. A new franchisee was in there.
Great, resold while he was still waiting for his payment.
Exactly. Resold without him ever getting the outstanding money he was owed from the original sale.
That raises a serious question about how effective a voluntary system can be if one side just stops responding, stops participating.
Right. Mohammed formally complained to the CFA, filed one on September 19th, then another on November 7th. The CFA acknowledged the first complaint on November 9th, but after that,
more silence.
You guessed it. More silence. And this is where it became really, really clear to Mohammed, and this is a huge takeaway for anyone listening, that the CFA's ethical promises, well, they're voluntary. They don't actually have the power to enforce them.
No teeth behind the words, essentially.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Even when he wrote again in December, specifically pointing out CFA Bylaws 16 and the Arthur Wishart Act, hoping maybe mentioning the law would spur action, still nothing. No follow-up from the CFA, none from Geno's. He felt like he'd done everything right, followed all the steps, but the system he trusted just wasn't delivering.
And that brings us to a really stark contradiction he found. You mentioned CFA bylaw 16. That bylaw apparently states very clearly that if a member is accused of breaking the ethics code, they have to be notified and given a chance to respond, basic procedural fairness.
That's reasonable.
But then the CFA's response to Mohammed basically said, well, that they might choose not to act on complaints, they might refuse to even forward them, and they wouldn't tell him the outcome anyway.
Hold on. So a system promises a process, a hearing, but reserves the right to just not do it and not tell you.
That's what Mohammed encountered. That level of discretion, it seems completely at odds with what someone in his shoes would expect from an organization promoting ethical standards.
It really makes you question what their actual role is in resolving disputes if they can just opt out like that.
And the communication became incredibly direct. On December 27th, Mohammed received a response, apparently from the CFA president, Sherry McNeil, which stated quite unequivocally, "We are not required to act on complaints. We will not engage further."
Wow, just full stop.
That was the moment, Mohammed said, that he realized the CFA seemed to value its own flexibility, its own discretion, way more than holding members accountable, even to their own code of ethics. It just vividly shows, doesn't it? If there's no enforcement mechanism, a code of ethics is just, well, it's just words on paper, aspirations.
And the impact on him, it wasn't just about the money, though that was obviously a huge part of it. He told us this wasn't just missed payments. It was lost trust, heavy debts, constant stress. You can feel the weight of that. And the realization that systems I believed in failed me. It's a powerful reminder that the damage goes way beyond the financial figures. That feeling of doing everything right and still hitting a dead end. It's incredibly frustrating and frankly demoralizing.
And if you zoom out, look at the bigger picture here, Mohammed's experience really highlights a fundamental point about these voluntary systems. Their success depends entirely on everyone involved playing ball, acting in good faith.
Right, if one party just decides not to.
Then the system offers very little real recourse. And this points to maybe a need for broader systemic changes to actually protect people in these kinds of situations. Mohammed's story, while personal, likely echoes experiences, others have had navigating systems that look solid on the surface but maybe aren't so strong under pressure.
Definitely. Which is why his journey, though tough, has given us some really practical, maybe painful, but useful lessons.
Right.
First, like we said, those CFA ethical commitments. Voluntary, not legally binding.
Crucial distinction.
Second, and Mohammed learned this the hard way, though maybe seasoned business folks know it, instinctively keep meticulous records. Every single thing. Not just receipts, but emails, notes of phone calls, offers made, offers refused, everything.
A paper trail is vital, absolutely.
Third, really understand your legal rights before you need them. Know the laws in your province, like the Arthur Wishart Act in Ontario. Don't wait until you're in trouble.
Proactive knowledge is key.
And finally, get legal advice early. Don't wait. And always ask about the costs up front. Mohammed put it bluntly. Once legal fees start, they spike fast. Don't wait, prepare before you need it.
Sound advice. And it really begs the question, if an organization like the CFA isn't going to enforce its own code of ethics, who's protecting franchisees? And what does that mean for other professional associations that operate on similar voluntary principles?
Yeah, and shouldn't transparency mean more than just saying if they'll handle a complaint? Shouldn't it include how it was handled? What really jumps out to you from all this, to me, it's that Mohammed's story shows when ethical codes aren't backed by enforcement, they're just words. It highlights this urgent need for real change to protect people.
I agree. His experience shines a harsh light on the vulnerabilities that can exist within these voluntary frameworks, vulnerabilities that often aren't obvious until you're caught in them.
And that's why his story isn't just about him. It feels like a real call to action, doesn't it?
Yeah.
For thinking about how these systems could be reformed. He shared a really powerful quote with us about this. He said, "I stood alone, but I'm speaking out now so others don't have to."
And his speaking out isn't over. His journey continues.
It does. In our next deep dive, we're actually going to follow Mohammed Khan as he takes the next step pursuing justice through the courts. We'll see what happens when these other avenues close down.
Looking forward to exploring that.
And look, if this story resonates with you, if you've faced something similar, we genuinely encourage you to share your experience. You can connect. I believe the handle is at Gino's former franchisee. Your story could really help push for change.
Absolutely. And just one final important reminder for everyone listening. This deep dive reflects Muhammad Khan's perspective and his experiences. As we mentioned, no court or regulatory body has made any findings of wrongdoing against Gino's Pizza Inc., or the CFA.